Noon, everybody. Uneducated Economist, the awkward farmer and company. I like it. Let's go, Simon. Thanks for being here. We got who is that? Benjamin joining the channel, becoming a member of the channel. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for being here and being a member of the channel as well, supporting the Uneducated Economist. Before everyone piles in, I think you should do a that teaches newcomers from the beginning. Yeah. Uh-oh, what did I get there? Hold on one second here. Oh, Benjamin, right on, man. Thank you for the Cash App, man. That was very cool of you. Um well, I mean, teaches from the very beginning. What is from the very beginning? Like the very beginning is very hard to determine like where that starts. Like, really you think about it from a primitive stance, like all the way back to days of hunters and gatherers. That's where the economy is truly built. It's the idea that we need food to survive. So what is it to be an economy is like, what is wealth? Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. Well, that can go all the way back to the primitive man. And there is where the economy really begins, is how is it that we make it from day to day? How is it that we survive every day? What is it that we need to do in order to acquire the things we need to survive every single day? And really, that's a instinctual behavior that's buried way deep down inside of every single one of us. I mean, we wonder why it is that we find so much human conflict around the world when yet they're so easy to be in love, right? But yet we find this constant battling and hatred and, fighting. So you think like, why is it that that occurs? Well, really, it's a human instinct way down inside. I mean, if you have two tribal two tribes fighting each other for hunting grounds, that's economic based. I mean, they need to survive every single day, and there's not enough room for all of us. So we obviously going to have to fight and kill each other off in order for all of us to survive, because if we don't, we're going to starve. And now you can look at it and say, oh, that's a barbaric way of thinking about it and looking at it. Well, it's the reality of the situation. I mean, we could become farmers and say we can grow enough food for everybody, but then there won't be enough farmland, because eventually the population will come to meet that. You can't really get to the very beginning. What is the very beginning? And the very beginning is your understanding of what economics is, because there is no other economy other than the one that you know, right? There's no other anybody out there who's going to come and say, hey, let me tell you what the economy is really like for you, because they know you as much as you know you. That doesn't exist. Only you know you as much as you know you, and the decisions that you have made that put you to where you are today. And we can blame other people out there and say, hey, because of the actions or inactions that have taken place, my life is no longer conditioned in the way that I want it to be. Well, that's not their fault. That's your fault for not adapting to the situation and being very aware that things constantly change, and that there's no way that you're going to be able to vote somebody in or have an expectation of somebody else performing in a way that says, yeah, you're meeting my expectations so that I can make it out here. And it doesn't work like that. It's just best to understand it for yourself and everything it is that you need to be aware. I mean, there's nobody out there who can tell you what a dollar is except for their opinion of it, including me, in my opinion of it. You go and do the research of what a dollar is, and you can form your own opinion of it. And if you just listen to one person, you'll have their opinion. If you listen to two, three, four, many people, you can start forming your own opinion. Saying, I've listened to so many people, so many different ways of looking at this, did my own research into what it is that I feel I needed to know to answer the questions that I had, and then you become the economy that you have. That's just, you just develop into that. People wonder, it was just like, what's a good or bad economy? When I think to myself, there is no good or bad economy. It's just the way that you've decided to interact with it that creates either good or bad decisions and puts you in the position that you're in. All right, so that's it from the beginning. I don't know, this little mindless babbling there, but In today's video, we're going to talk about what it is that really creates the price increases, like the price inflation everybody sees. Now, you can just, do the simple answer and just say, well, money printer does it, All right, so we got that part out of the way. We know the money printer is going to be causing a situation in which that prices could increase, but what really does, because not all prices increase equally. Like the simple doubling of money doesn't double all prices. Why? I mean, if it was such an easy thing to say that the money printer go off is the reason why there's an increase in prices, but then you don't find that same increase equally throughout the entire economy. You look at oil right now and it's under $70 a barrel. You have gold at $2,700 an ounce and you got silver at $35 or $33 an ounce. These things just don't seem to make sense when you have so much money printing that's taken place, and you can look at the price increases to say that was due to all the money printing, but yet then you don't have a real understanding of why it is that it didn't seem to increase in lumber, why there's a lot of prices out there that had come down dramatically and are expected to continue to come down. Some things like even homes have come down in price since their peak. Still substantially higher than they were prior to the pandemic and all the onset of inflation, but it's not like they're dramatically rising like they were a couple of years ago. Right? How much money has actually been pulled out of the system? Some, but not that much. So what is it? What causes the price increases? So I take it back to Cantillon's essay on economic theory. There is a link down in the description to Amazon affiliate to buy this particular essay, the same one that I am reading from. You do not have to buy this essay from Amazon. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute. So just by Googling, Cantillon, make sure you get there, Cantillon essay on economic theory. You can go and find the essay for free at the Mises Institute. This is part 2 of the essay, and it's chapter 7. I've read from this chapter many times, but I think it is incredibly telling of how it is that prices increase. Now, again, Cantillon is hundreds of years old, and he's talking about a silver mine. Today we have the equivalent of like the Federal Reserve and the central bank. But the ideas and the underlying economic theories that are related here in this chapter make so much sense when you think about it, is that certain prices have gone up dramatically while others sit still or didn't go up or even decreased in a lot of ways, like oil and lumber. Okay, this is chapter 7. It's more on the increase and decrease in the quantity of money in the state. Now, the abstract goes like this. When there is an increase in the quantity of money, prices will increase depending on how the new money holders decide to spend their money. The price changes will also be affected by such things as regulation on trade and perishability of the products that are traded. In other words, the simple quantity theory of money is naive in proposing that a doubling of the quantity of money will double all prices equally. Change relative prices and have real effect on the economy, a phenomenon known as the Cantillon effect. Where gold, silver, and copper are extracted from mines, they have an intrinsic value proportional to the land and labor that enter into their production. States that have no mines have the added cost of importing the metal. The quantity of money, like that of all other commodities, determines its value against all other goods in the bargaining process of the marketplace. In England, if England, for the first time, to make use of gold, silver, and copper in exchanges, money will be valuable according to the quantity of circulation, proportionally to its power of exchange against all other merchandise and products. The bargaining process of the market will determine the estimation of value. On the basis of this estimation, the property owners and entrepreneurs will set the wages of their domestic servants and workmen at so much a day or a year so that their families may be able to live on the wages they receive. Let us now assume that because ambassadors of foreign travelers residing in England as much money has been introduced into circulation as there was before, thereby doubling the quantity of money. So all of a sudden, a bunch of people show up with money and start spending it there in the area, and they start increasing the money that's within circulation. Right? This is what Cantillon was saying. This money will pass first in the hands of the various artisans, servants, entrepreneurs, and others who have had a share in providing transportation, amusement, etc. for these foreigners. So the people who had the money, right, start spending it. Those people who had first access to the money is who he's talking about, right? Starts flowing into basically the wants and needs of the people who have the money. Manufacturers, farmers, and other entrepreneurs will feel the effect of the increased money, which will increase expenditures of a great number of people, and this will in turn increase market prices. So a bunch of people out there all of a sudden have this money, and they go out there and start spending this money, and it increases the expenditures. That's what he was saying, right? The manufacturers, farmers, and other entrepreneurs will feel the effect of the increased money, which will increase the expenditures of a great number of people. And this will in turn increase market prices. So great people, not everybody got it, but a bunch of people did. And as they spent that money, it starts increasing the prices. Even the children of these entrepreneurs and artisans will enter into the new expenditures. With this abundance of money, their fathers will give them little money for their petty pleasures, and they will buy cakes and meat pies. So you think about it, like all of a sudden there's this new money coming in, and the family is just like, yeah, here, go have fun, right? And they hand them some money to go off there and play with it. Very much like what occurs today. You know, people give their kids money to go to the movies, so to speak. This new quantity of money will be distributed so that many who lived without using money before will now have some. So all the people who were living like day to day, just trying to figure out how to make ends meet, all of a sudden see that this money is flowing around, and they now have some access to this money because it's plentiful out there and people are spending it. Many exchanges which used to be made on credit by valuation will now be made with cash, and that will increase the price of circulation of money in England compared to before. So the more people who have it, the more people are spending it, right? The circulation starts to increase as more people are spending it, and that will increase the pace of circulation. Right? I conclude from all this that by doubling the quantity of money in a state, the prices of products and merchandise are not always doubled. The river which runs and winds about its bed will not flow with double the speed when the amount of water is doubled. The change in relative prices introduced by the increased quantity of money in the state will depend on how the money is directed and consumption and circulation. Right? So it depends on how this money starts flowing. No matter who obtains the new money, it will naturally increase consumption. See, now that's the thing I think most people need to really try to internalize, is that once they have acquired the new money, and once you have acquired it, that will start to increase consumption. See, this is reason why you find the Federal Reserve so focused in on like unemployment or the employment numbers, is that if you have an increase in employment, typically the way the Federal Reserve would look at it, more people employed, more people are working, more people are earning money, more people are going to be consuming. And that added consumption is what's going to increase the prices. And this is what Cantillon was saying long before there was ever a Federal Reserve or central banking or anything else. No matter who obtains the new money, it will naturally increase consumption, no matter who gets it. It'll increase the consumption. However, this consumption will be greater or less according to circumstances. Right? It will more or less be directed to certain kinds of commodities or merchandise according to the judgment of those who acquired the money. See, this is also important, like who gets the money first and how it is that they are going to be spending that money. Market prices will increase more for certain goods than others. Right? Even right there, Cantillon is saying it. Market prices will increase more for certain goods more than others. However abundant the money may be. In England, the price of meat might triple, but the price of wheat might increase less than 1/4. In England, it is still permitted to import wheat from foreign countries, but not cattle. So even talking about like even tariffy type of actions taking place. Tariffy, is that a word? Tariff-like. Tariffy. All right. Anyway, uh, for this reason, however, the increased money may not, or I'm sorry. For this reason, however great the increase of money may be in England, the price of wheat can only be raised above price in other countries where the money is scarce, by cost and risk of importing wheat from these foreign countries. So basically, even if you had a situation in which that the doubling of consumption of wheat started to take place, which should start increasing the prices, foreign production will start finding its way in, and it can only go up as much as the foreign production will allow with the cost of transportation and the risk associated with it. So once these foreigners say, hey, there's a demand for wheat that's doubled over here, they will start importing wheat, which essentially will put a cap on the price. It's not the same with the price of cattle, which will necessarily be proportioned to the quantity of money offered for meat in relation to the quantity of meat and the number of cattle raised there, right? Because they're not allowing cattle to be imported. An ox weighing 800 pounds sells in Poland and Hungary for 2 or 3 ounces of silver, but commonly sells in London marketplace for more than 40. See, over there in Poland and Hungary, they can only get 2 or 3 ounces for it. But if you send it all the way over to England, if you go over there where there's an abundance of money and a limited amount of cattle, you can get 40 ounces of silver for that same ox, 800 pounds. Yet the bushel of flour does not sell in London for even double the price of Poland and Hungary, because there's still an abundance of wheat that's available, minus the transportation cost of it, right? Or added transportation cost to it, however you look at it. An increase in money only increases the price of commodities and merchandise by the difference of the cost of transportation, when this transportation is allowed. See, now you think about that even here in the United States, that's one of the considerations when it comes to tariffs, is that if you just prevent them from bringing it in, like putting the tariffs on the Canadian lumber, if you just prevent that from coming in at a cheap price, that will add support to our mills here with their ability to sell lumber at a higher price. So it can only increase to that of what it is allowed. If they were to allow the Canadian lumber to come in without the tariffs, then lumber would be much cheaper. Right? An increase of the money only increases the price of the commodities and merchandise by the difference of the cost of transportation, when this transportation is allowed. But in many cases, transportation will cost more than the good is worth. Therefore, for example, and it's funny because he actually goes into talking about timber. For example, timber is useless in many places. The cost of transportation is also the reason why milk, fresh butter, lettuce, and game, etc., are almost given away in the provinces distant from the capital. So all this stuff like milk and butter and lettuce and game, and because it's so, probably just because of the sheer weight of it, timber, is not good for transportation. It spoils on the way and it's too heavy and it costs too much to do it. So it's like there's no real value to that in those areas where it's abundant, right? Where it says like you can almost give it away in the provinces distance from the capital, but you get it to the capital and now it's worth the money. If you can even get it there. All right. You see what is it? Where am I? Okay. I conclude that an increase of actual money in the state always causes an increase of consumption and a routine of greater expenditures. Now, I think that's probably the key to it right there. Like the key to understanding why it is that we have price increases. Who is responsible for it? Who is responsible for the price increases when the new money comes in? Again, I conclude that an increase of actual money, right? We all just got these stimulus checks. We all got this, new money flowing through the system. What's happening? In the state, it always causes an increase in consumption. That increase in consumption, right? And a routine of greater expenditures. That's the reason why. But the higher prices caused by this money does not affect all commodities and merchandise equally. So this is one of the reasons why you're finding that many items out there didn't quite experience the same inflationary pressure that many, that many did. Why gold is at 2,700 and silver's at 33. It just didn't enter the same channels the same way. Not to mention there's plenty of manipulation within the game, but still, it's the way that money flows and the way it's spent and who it is that's buying it. Prices do not rise proportionally to the quantity of money unless what has been added continues in the same circulation channels as before. So everybody who had first access to that money, like when we got stimulus checks and everybody was all of a sudden flush with cash, everybody ran out and started spending the money the way that they normally would, or I guess impulsively did, but ultimately went in through many channels. Not just given to the rich who are going and invested in properties and stocks and bonds, but it was given to the poor as well, who goes off and spends it on whatever it is that they want, toys or food or bills or whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. But it just starts going through all these different channels, right? Not just the same channels that would happen if you had given it to the rich, who are just going to enter into a handful of those things. This is given to everybody, all channels at once, right? So again, let me read that, because it's really, this is like, I mean, to me, that's very telling, right? In other words, hold on, back it up. Okay, prices do not rise proportionally to the quantity of money unless what has been added continues in the same circulation channels as before. In other words, those who offered 1 ounce of fish or 1 ounce of silver, oh, jeez, 1 ounce of fish. And I guess I'm just tired today or something. Okay. Let me get back here. So those who offered 1 ounce of silver in the marketplace would be the same and only ones to offer 2 ounces when the amount of money in circulation is doubled. And that is hardly ever the case. I recognize that when a large surplus of money is introduced in the state, the new money gives a new direction to consumption and even a new speed to circulation. However, it is not possible to say exactly to what extent. And that's the end of that chapter. So I think that's very, like, it's very important to like internalize that information to the idea that it's not just the quantity of money that has been produced. That's like the very simplest way to look at it and say that's what's causing the price increases. But then it's very difficult to then explain why it is that lumber is as cheap as it is, because it should be up with all the rest of the prices if it's sheerly just strictly the idea that it's the quantity of money that is doing it. But it's not just the quantity of money, it's the way that money is circulating. Who has first access to that money, the way they spend that money. This is really what's causing the prices to move in a particular direction, and what's causing the prices of certain assets to go up while other ones just seem to be sitting idle. Now, understanding that when you have a fiat currency system like we do, then it's not just a matter of how that money flows through the system, but also the interest rates that allows that money to flow through the system. And see, this is, again, very different from Cantillon's day, but the underlying economic force is still the same. How does that money flow? If you have interest rates that are attached to things like mortgage rates that then will determine how many transactions are actually happening out there within the economy, you're going to find that the movement within the interest rates in the housing market being correlated to each other are going to start creating or the inflation or deflationary scenario that's tied to it, right? So if you have more people being able to do transactions, then you're going to have a supply demand issue that comes along with it. If you have less people doing transactions, typically you would see an increase in supply. But if you have a market that is dependent upon interest rates in order to bring in the supply of buyers, then again, you're going to find that the prices that are a result of that particular market are going to be influenced by the amount of buyers that are in the market in accordance to the interest rates that are out there. Did I say all that right? Anyway, so understanding that there is still the underlying economic force that is at play, regardless of whether or not we have a central bank system or a hard currency system like Cantillon was describing, it ultimately ends in the same results, and that is that the price increases happen to where it is that the money is going to, right? Who is it that is spending the money? How is that consumption taking place? And if you have consumption in particular directions that is only available to those who have first access to that money, then you're going to start seeing increases in those particular assets, right? Mainly the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, which ultimately had loaded up the big banks with reserves and gave people who were borrowing money the first access to it. They put that money into stocks and bonds and real estate and saw those particular assets moving up dramatically, while the cost of living didn't see new money coming in. And so therefore you didn't really find a whole lot of inflationary pressure when it came to what it is that the Federal Reserve is looking at when it comes to inflation, mainly the consumer price index. So when you have new money that's coming into the system and it's only available to those who are borrowing it, what it is that they are borrowing to buy, then starts finding the price inflation, while everything else fairly sits idle or doesn't have that much inflation. During the pandemic, everybody all of a sudden got a bunch of money, right? Now, I'm not saying everybody, because plenty of people were saying, I didn't get no stimulus check and I didn't get anything and I was sitting here just broke as ever. Okay. Many people did. And I know a lot of people who got, the extended unemployment, from the federal government. And there was making more money not working than they were, actually working. And they were spending that money because they were sitting at home, right? They had nothing else to do. So they spent that money on fixing up their apartments and buying exercise equipment, and buying new computers and TVs, and just spending that money on consuming good, or on all the consumer goods out there. At the same time, there was a severing of the supply chain, which restricted a lot of available products from getting through the system. So if you throw a bunch of money at people and say, here, go spend that money, and you sever the supply chain at the same time, creating supply-demand imbalances, then you're going to start finding inflation in all kinds of stuff out there, right? One, you got added consumption, and two, you got supply chain disruptions, right? You added consumption and supply chain disruptions. There we go. Make sure I said it right. And when you combine those two together, then it's going to be obvious, right? You're going to have a lot of consumption going into particular products that then is going to have a limited supply, right? You're going to start seeing the prices move up, just like anything else out there. So it's easy to just say, hey, money printer go off, prices go up. What else do you need to know? It's a lot harder to understand why it is that the prices increase in some areas and not in others. And if you can understand why that is taking place, and it's through essentially the ability to consume and what it is that people are consuming and how it is that they are able to get the money to consume, this is the real reason why you find price inflation, not just because of the money printer, right? I mean, that's the simplest way to look at it, but it also leaves you without the understanding of how this actually occurs, and then again, not being able to understand why certain things are taking place the way they are. All right, half an hour into that video, that was pretty good. I thought that was a good video, right? Personally, wow, look at all you people talking here. Okay, let's cruise it up a little bit, and we will go to right here, stock. What is that, stock? Apocalypse, Reverend of Middle Class. Okay, Randall, Wary, Stephen Keen, Michael Hudson, Real Economist later. Okay. Credible threat means that if you tell a great lie, it will take on validity of its own. No, Greg, I think you misunderstand it. See, the credible threat actually has to be credible, right? It actually has to be something that people will truly believe. Now, it's not just a matter of telling the greatest lie, which, I mean, I guess that would work in a sense that if people believed it, right? So that would make it a great lie, as if people believed it. But ultimately, the credible threat works because people know that they will do it. So, I mean, I think probably one of the greatest examples of the credible threat was that special purpose vehicle of the corporate debt lending facility. Now, that corporate debt lending facility that was established during the pandemic with the Federal Reserve's emergency lending powers, 13.3, giving them the ability to set up an entity that was separated from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, with this unusual and exigent circumstance of the pandemic, and then funded that thing with hundreds of billions of dollars, and then put out the narrative that they were going to be buying corporate debt. They had the ability to do it. In fact, they did buy some corporate debt. They established a credible threat. They were like, we will do it. In fact, we are doing it. And people lost their minds. They were like, holy crap, look what the Federal Reserve is doing. I know, I was one of them. I was out there on YouTube going, hey man, the Federal Reserve is picking the winners and losers. Right? They're saying, hey, this corporation wins, this one wins, you failed, you win, right? This is what I was basically saying, because this is what the Federal Reserve had established. They had a facility. It was funded. It was purchasing corporate debt. Once that information got out to the public, they lost their minds and they started front-running the Federal Reserve, and they loaded up on corporate debt, and the Federal Reserve sat back and went like, yeah, buddy, look at all these corporations getting funding. In fact, they funded themselves before we really even had this thing up and running. Like, we got the thing up and running and bought some some corporate debt, but all the corporations were essentially already funded by that point. The idea of the Federal Reserve setting that thing up was enough. That was enough, right? They didn't have to do it. Like, they didn't, like, at that point, all the corporations were already funded. It was like, man, we better go ahead and just pull through with this thing, since we already said that we were going to set it up. But at that point, they didn't even need to anymore. Like, it totally worked. And nobody talks about that. Right? I mean, I am the only one who actually has that incorporated into my understanding and theories and strategies, talking about that exact thing. And that's not me saying that. That comes directly from the Federal Reserve, saying that these corporations were funded before they even had the facilities up and running. So no, the credible threat is real. It's credible. It's not a great lie, right? I mean, it could be a great lie, but it's not necessarily. In fact, it would be less effective if it was a lie than if they actually set it up. And, it's just like, I mean, I don't know. It's just like, if somebody has a whip and they were going to say, hey man, I'm going to smash you with this thing if you don't go to work, right? And I mean, that's a pretty credible threat, right? I mean, they don't have to actually do it. They're going to snap that thing off into the air. And that would be enough to be like, hell yeah, man, I know you're going to hit me with that thing, right? Same thing. It's like, listening to the Fed works until it doesn't. Well, and that's just the thing. Like, how, like, if you go back and you read some, like, news articles talking about the Federal Reserve going all the way back to 1913 into the 30s and the 50s and the 70s and the 90s and all that, you can find so many articles of people talking about how the Federal Reserve is about ready to fail. Like, a lot. Right? And it's always right on the edge, right? Always right there, about ready to completely collapse. Always right there, about ready to lose their ability to continue on with this, Ponzi scheme and the Fiat and it goes on and on and on. And I mean, it goes like, that's part of the game. That right there, I think, is part of their game, is to make sure that people have this belief that they are about ready to fail at any given moment. And I think that's like, living that fear is the way that they are able to control. It's like, the more I study, the more I look into this stuff, it's funny, the less concern I get, the more I get into this. It's like, the less concern I get. It's not a concern. Like, it's not like my concern level has dropped because I don't believe that there's going to be a crash or a failure or economic collapse or something like that. That's not what I'm saying that I'm not concerned about. Those concerns are still there. My concern, or my lack thereof of concern, is in that I'm going to have to feel pain and suffering on account of it. Like, that concern is very low. It's because I feel that from the things that I have studied, the things that I've researched, the way that I position myself, and how it is that I can interact with the failure or the economy, like the rest of the people, as we go into a failing economy, is that failing? Like, if I'm able to prosper in that, I'm actually doing well, then I can actually say, no, this is a good economy. for me, right? And I think that it's always going to be a good economy for me because I don't see it as a good or bad economy. All I see it as is good or bad position within it, right? All right, moving on. Hey, Lumberjack Landlord, we got Matthew up in the house, right? Thank you for being here. Let me see. Residential real estate investors were listening to Bernanke. We were watching people we wouldn't qualify for rentals get approved for mortgages. Weren't listening. There you go. Residential real estate investors weren't listening. And see, now here's what I find funny is that if you were listening to Ben Bernanke in the mainstream media, like if you were listening to his interviews and the stuff that he was projecting out there, I think that stuff was propagandized misinformation. I think that that was a very, I don't think that information was meant for you to have any other understanding than the forward guidance that they were trying to project. The speeches and the internal messages that they were giving to each other prior to the great financial crisis, I think was incredibly telling. Like they knew the great financial crisis was coming, but they couldn't explain that out there to the public or the public would have lost their mind. But they were very much aware of it. Like that speech that I cover all the time, deflation and how to prevent it from ever occurring here is incredibly like telling of that whole situation. Right. So, and that's the unfortunate part. Like I see Matthew saying, I completely agree. And see, that's the thing about it is like most people don't take the time to actually dive any further past in the news articles they read. And since the news article is propagandized, like every bit of it, I have not found, I have found very few lumber articles talking the reality of the situation that I see it as. Like I see lumber in a so much different view from every single mainstream media interview and article and talking point and people who have videos on YouTube that are far more popular than mine explaining what's going on within the lumber industry. All those people got it wrong. And I'm not trying to be like cocky or arrogant when I say that stuff, but I've been following it like every single day for 7 years now, putting these videos out there. And the information that I tried to present to people is not mentioned. It's not brought up by any of these other people out there. They're only regurgitating the same information that they've received from the few people on the news articles that they're listening to. Right? Where I get my information from people who are actually in the system, who are actually working it, loggers and truck drivers and mill operators and other distribution networks. I mean, it's all, I mean, I do it all. I do it all. This is what Ben Bernanke had to say in 2002, like 6 years before the great financial crisis. He says, deflationary recessions may differ in one respect from normal recessions in which the inflation rate is at least modestly positive. Now, that's something that's very interesting to think about, right? That the inflation was modestly positive in this recessionary pressure situation. The deflation of sufficient magnitude may result in nominal interest rates declining to zero or very close to zero. Once the nominal interest rate is at zero, no further downward adjustment in the rate can occur since lenders generally will not accept a negative nominal interest rate when it is possible instead to hold cash. At this point, nominal interest rates is said to have hit the zero bound. Now, again, this was 6 years before it happened. 6 years. Ben Bernanke was strategizing along with other central bankers on what it was that they were planning on doing once they hit the lower bound of zero. They had planned it 6 years or better. I mean, he had to put the speech together, so you know that they were talking about it before the speech. But ultimately, since this speech, they had 6 years to plan it out on what it was they were planning on doing. If you go into this speech, they continue on to talk about asset purchases. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Well, I can't go into it because I don't know where it was in the speech, but anyway. Oh, well. Curing deflation. Let me start with some general observations about monetary policy at the zero bounds, sweeping under the rug for a moment some technical and operational issues. As I have mentioned, some observers have concluded that when central bank's policy rate falls to zero, its practical minimum, monetary policy loses its ability to further stimulate aggregate demand in the economy. This is where the Federal Reserve was like, they knew we are going to fail, guys. There is no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Ben Bernanke was telling his homies 6 years ahead of time, if we get to the zero lower bound, we are at no more monetary policy. It's over. All right? Monetary policy loses its ability to further stimulate aggregate demand. At a broad conceptual level, and in my view, in practice as well, this conclusion is clearly mistaken. Oh, wait a minute. You mean that the adjustment of interest rates is not the only tool? Because if you adjust monetary policy to the lower bound of zero, it's over. Like you just said, it's like monetary policy loses its ability to stimulate aggregate demand in the economy. It's over, right? No, no, no. Ben Bernanke says, nah, this conclusion is clearly mistaken. Right? That's okay. Here in 6 years, when this happens, I got an idea. Let me share with you my idea that we can deal with an economy once the interest rates have hit the lower bound of zero and we can't stimulate the economy, can't stimulate the aggregate demand. Let me share this idea with you, right? He goes on to say, indeed, under a fiat, that is, paper money system, a government, in practice, with the central bank in cooperation with other agencies, should always be able to generate increased nominal spending and inflation, even when the short-term nominal interest rate is at zero. Really. So somehow, from pretty much the creation of the Federal Reserve, and during times of economic strain and downward economic activity and the dropping of aggregate demand, the Federal Reserve would look to lowering interest rates in order to increase that aggregate demand. And he is saying, nah, we got another idea. We got this whole other idea that we can deal with the economy once we have lost the ability to do that anymore. Let me show you this. He goes on to say this. The conclusion that deflation is always reversible under a fiat system follows from the basic economic reasoning. Goes on to say this. A little parable may prove useful. Today, an ounce of gold sells for $300 more or less. Now suppose that a modern alchemist solves his subject's oldest problem by finding a way to produce unlimited amounts of new gold at essentially no cost. Moreover, his invention is widely publicized and scientifically verified. He announces his intention to begin massive production of gold within days. What would happen to the price of gold? Presumably, the potentially unlimited supply of cheap gold would cause the market price of gold to plummet. Indeed, if the market for gold is to any degree efficient, the price of gold would collapse immediately after the announcement of the invention, before the alchemists had produced and marketed a single ounce of the yellow metal. See this? This is what their plan. 6 years before it occurred, this was their plan, is to talk about the forward guidance, the use of forward guidance. He describes it with the guy who invents a gold machine. What has this got to do with monetary policy? Like gold, U.S. dollars have value only to the extent that they are strictly limited in supply. But the U.S. government has a technology called a printing press, or today, its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many U.S. dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. By increasing the number of U.S. dollars in circulation, or even by credibly threatening to do so, right? Even by credibly threatening to do so, the U.S. government can always reduce the value of the dollar in terms of goods and services, which is the equivalent to raising the prices of dollars in those goods and services. We conclude that under a paper money system, a determined government can always generate higher spending and hence positive inflation. Okay. So this is they knew it. They knew way ahead of time on what it was that they were planning on doing. So when Ben Bernanke came out and says, "Oh, hey, we got this thing all wrapped up. We got it controlled. It's just a subprime issue, blah, blah, blah," all part of the credible threat. Right? It was all part of it. They knew that they were going to hit the lower bound of zero. They knew that they were going to have to go into asset purchases, quantitative easing. All right. Don't listen to the Fed. Watch what they do. Now, I think you can listen to the Fed, but I think you have to listen to what it is that the Federal Reserve is communicating to other Fed members or other central bankers out there. I wouldn't necessarily listen to the Federal Reserve when it comes to the mainstream media unless you are looking for, like, actually listening, actively listening for the credible threat. Then I would listen to them because there you can find it, you can hear it. You know? But you have to be aware of the strategy ahead of time, knowing that they have communicated and have not changed the way that they have viewed how they look at inflation, considering that they are going for an inflation that is moderately above 2%. Most people think it's going to a target of 2%, and that has, like, most strategies just completely wrong. Like, if you are a financial advisor and you're anticipating monetary policy to be conducted once the Federal Reserve, or in a particular way, once the Federal Reserve has achieved their 2% target, then everything that you are planning is incorrect. It's wrong, and that's the way like 99% of the people do it, and that's on purpose so that the Federal Reserve can control the narrative. All right, moving on. Kind of like you have to listen carefully to the media's news report to get the news and then take it with a grain of salt. Well, even then, like, I don't know if the news reports anything accurately. Like, even with the grain of salt, like, I mean, maybe, like when okay, so take for example, like the lumber thing. It was just like lumber prices hit a new record high. Okay, well, that part you can take, that's probably real, and they give you the number. It hit 1,700 per thousand today or something. And it was like, okay, that's real. And then once they start explaining why, all that stuff is wrong. So you got like a little tiny bit of information in there that you can actually consider to be accurate, and the rest of it is just wrong. It's just like they give it a different meaning than it should have, and they are considering it something that it's not. And that's really what it comes down to. All right. Calling 11 on the fuzzy dice, by the way. Thank you, Brody. All right. I have an old 1999 Ranger I bought new, only 70,000 miles on it. Wow. That's pretty cool. I missed the 20th century. Love Rangers. NS10s, but Ranger more solid. Yeah, I had a 95 Ford Ranger that I absolutely loved. I drove it for over 300,000 miles. It was a great truck. Now my Explorer is like, it's a 99, and it's kind of like the same vehicle. It has the same look to it, kind of inside of it. And this one has 101,000 miles on it right now. India, yes or no? I don't know what that is. Okay. Dixter, why are you getting overtaxed? Or how the news tells you that inflation is down, but they don't explain to you that they're not talking about rent or housing inflation. That's on another table. Well, and I think about it, like, for me personally, I haven't had experienced housing or rent inflation for 3 years. And I locked myself in 3 years ago at a particular house payment, and so like I haven't experienced that. So as prices do find their peaks and stop continues, like I think a lot of people think when the inflation is over, they're anticipating like prices going back to normal. That would be that would be deflation. I don't anticipate that. Inflation coming down means that prices aren't going up as fast as they were, but they still go up. Like, that's the fiat currency system. It's constant dollar devaluation over time, with no real other way of going about it. Like there are moments of deflationary concern that does scare the hell out of the Federal Reserve if they were to absolutely lose the ability to stimulate aggregate demand through either forward guidance, money printing, whatever it is that they got going on at the time. If they're failed to be able to do that and get the prices to move up, their whole system will collapse, and that's very difficult for them to operate in, as there's really no control there. Now, the other direction, when you have inflationary aspects to they're not concerned about that. That is, in fact, that was the problem they needed to solve, was inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. So when I think about the Fed and their strategies, and what I think like most people look at is like everything is completely backwards. Nobody looks at it the same way. And so again, like I think to myself, it's just like I've been able to deal with the fact that the inflation that most people are fearing and dealing with, I really don't have a position in which that concerns me as much, right? Food cost goes up, yeah, that's a problem, right? But if you live paycheck to paycheck, it's a serious problem. I don't live paycheck to paycheck. I've conditioned my life and so that my bills are very low, so that when I have less income coming in, it still doesn't leave me in a position in which that now I'm at a month, I can't make my monthly bills. I just don't do it. That's one of the reasons why I don't buy a new car, is because I don't want that extra monthly payment and put me in that position that, oh shoot, man, if my income goes down for a particular month, that means that I start unwinding the process. No, not for me. That means the process slows a little bit, but I still move forward. uh, actually, my taxes lower than others in my neighborhood. Yeah, my taxes went up this year. People were saying, "Oh man, you're gonna have to be concerned about your taxes going up," and I'm thinking, well, taxes can only go up by 3% a year here, and although over time that would probably be pretty substantial, but like I think this year the property taxes went up like $120, something like that. 100, like it was less than $150 for the entire year, right? So yeah, it went up, but like not so much that it was just like, oh man, that's painful. It sucks, but it's not painful. It was just like, so you don't go out for a couple of times that year to make up for the fact that your taxes have gone up. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, taxes going up is not a big concern for me. Let's cruise down here to the bottom. Hey UE, what kind of jobs do you think will be remaining in the U.S.? Well, I mean, what kind of jobs really exist here now? I mean, the the idea of like manufacturing jobs, which everybody would have probably really enjoyed having, so that you could have that like American dream life, that's all going away. That's not something that is coming back in any kind of meaningful way. Some people are going to get those, and you might be able to find a job that actually pays enough that you can have the house and wife and kids and all that other stuff. But for the most part, the way things are now, it's changed quite a bit. And so to go off and get a job that provides you with enough to do all that stuff is probably not going to be like the strategy that most people take on. I think about how easy it is to actually make money out there. I mean, really, there's so many opportunities out there to do all kinds of different things that doesn't necessarily rely on a 9 to 5 job. It makes me think like, what opportunities could people take advantage of in small little ways? Like I even think about the Amazon affiliate link here on this channel. It's not like it's going to make me rich by any means by having, offering up a essay to people to go buy, and I get a little tiny, few penny commissions off of it. But it does bring in, some money. And when people are hitting that affiliate link and going and purchasing whatever they want after that, the commissions could do pretty well. But again, it's not going to be anything that makes me rich, but it is another little form of revenue that I can earn, right? I mean, selling the little Teespring merch, which I never push on the channel, but it brings in a little bit of revenue when somebody buys a hat or a t-shirt or a hoodie or something. And all these little different ways of making money, I think people just kind of ignore. They think, well, it's not worth it, or it's like it's not enough, it doesn't earn enough. And I think to myself, well, no, everything has to be built, right? Like you have to earn $1, and then you earn $2, and you earn $4, right? 8, 16, onward. To me, that's a pretty simple process. I don't think about how to earn $8,000 in one single shot. I mean, there's times I've done it and I've been, wow, look at that, like how that works. That's pretty incredible. But, I mean, I take it for just as much as like earning, $100 off of the Amazon affiliate link. To me, that's like the same energy, same motion, same direction. Right? One, you have to work a long time to get this one payday. Other days, you just put this little tiny bit of effort in, do every day. Don't even really think about it much, and at the end of a month, you get a little bonus. And like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yay, right? It's all on how you work it. And so I don't know what jobs are going to be out there. There's going to be all kinds of ways of making money, and I didn't even know that I was able to make money the way I do. I was just like, I kind of accidentally figured it out. It was like, oh look, this is cool, you know. I heard that other people could do it. Let me see how I can do it. All right. When the hurricane comes through, I throw all my belongings I don't sell in my truck and I am out. All right. When Harris moth moves, she is lying or crackling. All right. Well, I just watched some videos stating that when we went off of a 10% reserve system, that was extremely inflationary, like going into the next stage of inflation acceleration. Yeah. Okay. We had moved. What happened there when we left the 10% reserve is because we went from a limited reserve system into what they refer to as an abundant reserve system. And now the abundant reserve system meant that the banks didn't have to have a certain amount of reserve requirement, meaning that they could drop the reserve requirement to zero and say, hey, you guys don't have any kind of reserve requirement. The only thing about that is because the banks were completely loaded up on reserves. And so therefore having a minimum reserve requirement didn't make any sense since they didn't have a limited amount of reserves. They were abundant in reserves. And so they got rid of that 10% reserve requirement simply because of the abundant reserve system that we had moved into. Now, with that abundant reserve system, they also lost the ability to establish the effective fund rate in the overnight lending rate between the big banks. So understanding that when we were in a limited reserve system prior to what we are now, the big banks had a limited amount of reserves and a reserve requirement that was set by the Federal Reserve saying, hey, you have to have so much of your assets held in reserves. And if you don't have enough, you have to borrow that in order to establish to meet the reserve requirement, to meet that minimum reserve requirement. Now, at the end of the day, some of the big banks would be in excess reserves and some of them would be in need of reserves. The ones who had excess reserves would lend them to the ones who were in need of reserves. That overnight lending rate was the effective fund rate. So when the Federal Reserve says, hey, we're shooting for 2.5% or 3% or whatever it was that they were going for at the time, the big banks out there would have a reserve requirement that they would have to meet. The Federal Reserve would buy and sell the reserves off of these big banks to establish that limited reserve so that that overnight lending rate would fall within the Federal Reserve's target. So that overnight lending rate was the effective fund rate of what it is that the Federal Reserve was attempting to target. Does all that make sense? So then when quantitative easing started to kick in, actually it was before that, September of 2019, the repo facility had stepped in and dealt with a cash shortage, and that repo facility ended up becoming a standing repo facility. But it was later on that the repo facility ended up being the place that all the abundant cash from the quantitative easing that would need to find a place to go to found its way back to the repo facility. All right, so they could go and have an account at the repo facility and an account on excess reserves. And if the excess reserves was a lesser interest rate than the repo facility, and between the two of them, they were able to establish the effective fund rate. So they moved it from the overnight lending rate between the big banks and the limited reserve system and moved it over to the repo facility and the interest on excess reserves held at the Federal Reserve. And between those two, they were able to channel the Fed funds target. So all that makes sense? See, stuff is like, it takes a lot to understand it all, right? It takes a lot to know, and like it goes even deeper than that, but that's like the easiest way to understand it. And that the abundant reserves that we are now facing is going to go at some point into a limited reserve system again. Like that will take place. And when that happens, the big banks are going to need a place to go to in order to find liquidity, right? To find the cash that they need. And now when that happens, it's either going to come from the borrowing of banks, okay? And if they don't have it available or the interest rate is too high, they're going to have to find it coming from somewhere. If they can't find it from the market, they get it at the discount window. And this is one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve is trying to take that stigma away from the discount window, because they know this operation is going to be taking place. At some point, the reserves will go from abundant to less abundant, be limited out there. Banks are going to be like, hey, we need liquidity. Where do we get it from? And if the other banks are saying, hey, we're going to charge you a heck of an interest rate, or it's too high, or they don't have it to begin with, then they're going to have to find that liquidity somewhere, and they're going to find it at that discount window. Right now, because the discount window holds a stigma, banks are very nervous about this opportunity to go there without being told, hey, you got a black mark on your record here for going to the discount window. You must be in hard shape or bad shape if you're going there. So this is what the Federal Reserve is facing right now. In fact, we just covered this in one of the Fed speeches in one of our members only videos, talking about this exact thing and how it is that they plan on conditioning the banking system to require these banks to go to the discount window and borrow money from the discount window, so that way all of them at some point are there, and that way they aren't getting picked on saying, hey, why are you there? Nobody would even notice. It would be like, hey, we're required to. We all have to put up collateral. We all have to have an account. We all have to, at some point, make some sort of exchange going on here, so that when banks are there, nobody notices that it's a bank's in a bad position. They're like, here's some money. Nobody will notice, because everybody's here, Wow. All right, moving on down. Lumberjack, that makes sense too. At 20, you haven't been around nearly enough to believe that we haven't had hard times. You were 3 during the great financial crisis. Oh, yeah. It's going to hit a lot of the younger generation in a very profound way. I mean, one of the things that I think is probably going to hit them the worst is if we actually have a significant rise in unemployment, because I believe that most of the younger generation, at least for the last, those who are, say, between 18 and 28, maybe even 33, over the 35, those people are not in an economy or haven't experienced an economy in which that there was massive unemployment for a prolonged period. Like trying to go and find a job where you are lucky to go and get a job at McDonald's. Like you would be lucky to get there, where you go to McDonald's and it's not just kids working there, but there's adults working there too, because that's the job that they need in order to make ends meet, and there's not a lot of jobs available out there, right? That sort of environment, I just don't believe the younger generation has any real experience with and has no idea what that's like. Ghosting jobs, like that has turned into a regular thing where you just simply just don't show back up for work. You don't tell them, you don't tell anybody about it, you're just gone. That's it. Right? Now, that is not something that you would have ever done when I was younger. If you had ghosted a job, it would have almost guaranteed that you wouldn't have gotten another job. Like almost guaranteed, right? If you did not leave that job under good terms, you were looked at like Like as if you gone to the discount window or something. You were like, why did you just quit that? Why did you just like leave? Why didn't, what happened there? Because there is so many people applying for that job, they don't have to pick you, right? But here, this day and age, it's much different. Like they'll take any warm body off the street in order to get, somebody behind the counter. And that's not the way like most of us who are, after about 30 years old, 35 years old, you didn't, that's not something that any of those people had experienced. Hey, right on Hidden, thank you very much for joining or being a member of the channel. All right, do you have to learn Spanish if you want to work at McDonald's around here? Too many people and not enough resources. The disaster was predicted in the limits to growth study, and it said the consequences of our greed would arrive in 2020. Blame it on the migrants and call it a day. Well, I mean, if that's the meaning that you give it, then your ego will produce an environment in which that will be the result. They're closing my local Big Lots. Sad situation. The last 4 years have rewarded a lot of bad behavior, irrational exuberance. Your generation isn't the cause of it, Rocket. It was ours, Generation X and Boomers. You all just feeling the consequences of our addiction to bread and circus. Alright, they have no clue what hard is. That's the fact. When you are 18, you start to understand it, but things started getting better in 2011. So 13 plus 18, at best 31, might start have a clue, maybe. Trump worked at McDonald's today. Congress must vote to send troops to war. The president, by law, can only send in Marines for a limited amount of time. Then Congress must vote. Finally caught alive. Right on, Hidden. Thanks for all your hard work and great info. And closing on the cheapest house I could find. Well, good for you, man. It's, becoming the property owner. It's becoming the property owner or capitalist or both, and better both of it. Because most of us are probably not going to be a prince or have generational wealth or anything like that. Most of us are going to have to figure out what it is that we need to do. And there's everything that I have ever studied from all the economic history, from all this stuff, it comes down to two types of people, right? Property owners and capitalists. And if you're not going to be the property owner, then you have to be the capitalist, which means that you are going to take your money and invest it into ways that then has a return back to you. Whether it's moving into dividend-paying stocks or businesses or some sort of investment that has that return. Being the capitalist is the only way to really get yourself away from being dependent upon somebody else, upon that 9-to-5 job. It's the only thing that's going to get you to live free. And then being the property owners is ultimately everything that Cantillon talks about as far as being in charge of everything that is out there. It all comes down to the property owners. What they desire, what they pleasure, the way they spend their money, it all comes down to the property owners, and they are the ones who are the reasonings that the environment looks the way it does. It's, all the pleasurable experiences that are out there are a result of the property owners. All the fancy things that people enjoy is all because of the property owners. Everything does. Now, if it wasn't for the property owners being out there, most people would end up being in a position of attempting to become a property owner. And that's why we have such a separation between the rich and the poor, is because it's becoming so difficult to become a property owner. There was a time when it was easy, or easier than it is now. So becoming a property owner is very difficult. And if you're able to do it, which anybody can do it if they focus in and learn how it's done, then you get on the other side of the wedge. If you don't want to be the property owner, you have to be the capitalist. So you have to invest into the system one way or the other to get the return on your capital. It's the only way. It's the only two ways. And all this idea that you go and work hard and get a degree and have a really good career and all that other stuff only works if you are actual capitalistic mindset underneath, meaning that you're going to take those efforts and convert it into retirement funds, right? Which is ultimately being the capitalist mindset. So again, however you get it done, whether you do it with a degree, whether you do it from your own hard work and efforts, whether you do it from, being the business mindset, however it goes down, right? But that's it. Property ownership and capitalists. Yeah. After that, you're going to suffer. UE, would you rather own your own home or own an income-bearing property? I would rather own an income-bearing property than to own my own home. Like, the home itself, like to me, owning this home is only useful to me as I'm raising my family. After that, I don't know why the home would be any use to me. The only use for it to me would be a place to store my stuff, and I don't really have that much stuff. So I don't need a house. I need a house to raise a family with. After that, I don't need it. So it will become a income-bearing property for me if I rent it out or something of that nature. So to me, like, I would much rather own, if you were to ask me, I would much rather own an income-bearing property than own a house to live in. Right? And ultimately, I would like this one to be rented out, and I live out in the barn. All right, $10 coming from Neo Amish Dude. Thank you so much for the $10. The support for the channel is greatly appreciated, man. Closing on my first house next week and started a home business in the spring. No better time than now to get it done. Excuses get you nowhere. Keep up the great content, brother. Well, thank you so much, Neo Amish Dude, for the $10, and congratulations on getting the home and having a business started all at the same time, man. That's killer. That's the mindset that most people wish that they can be in, and you're absolutely right. Sitting around waiting and giving excuses it will get you nowhere. It's not a plan, So thank you so much for the $10. I really appreciate you, man. All right, Jesse Kabasa, thank you so much for the $10. Simon, why did you give up on day trading? Easy to learn. You would be good at it. The reason why I gave up on day trading is the reasoning that I was doing it. Like, I'm not the type of person, even though I study economics and I look at kind of investments and I look at interest rates and I look at places that you could go to as far as like being able to make money and stuff like that, I'm not really that money hungry. Right? I'm not like, I don't know what I would do. Like, somebody says, man, what would you do if you had $1 million? And be like, I don't know, travel more, maybe, eat more food, eat better food or something. I don't know. Like, I don't have any real ambition to have a whole bunch of money. Like, other than maybe traveling, that would be the only thing I could think that I would do with money. Like, I don't have any real need or use for it. The only thing I really wanted from anything out there, like from anything, from this YouTube channel, from my job, from all the stuff that I do, the only thing I really wanted was to be able to pay my bills on time. That's it. That's like, that to me, there was a time in my life that was the only thing I wanted. All right, was just to be able to pay my bills on time and to not stress about it. And having that is amazing. And so, like, to try and go out there and say, hey, you need to earn $1 million this year, or $100,000 in a month, or something of that nature. And it was just like, wow, that would be fun. Why? Why would I do that? Like, what would be, like, I could bust my ass, make it happen. And then once I got there, it would be like, other than saying I did it, what would have been the point? What I'm doing right now is helping people. I'm being useful. I'm being, what I like to think, inspiring to other people to try and figure this stuff out for themselves as well. And by doing that, I'm rewarded. I was, rewarded with super chats just now. I'm going to get rewarded with ad revenue. That was pretty cool. Like, I didn't have to work that hard for it. I just came out and share some ideas, do some study, do some research, be able to try and, deliver it in an entertaining way, and that's what I need to do. And that was it. Like, why put out, you know, time and effort away from my family to try and acquire something that I really didn't even want in the first place? This is doing it for me. Like, I could do better. I could do course, I could do books, I could do things that would deliver this message out there in a way that would be more rewarding to me. That's the type of stuff that I want to pursue. Is to pursue those type of efforts. To try and go out there and day trade sounds kind of fun. Like, it might be kind of appealing for a little bit, but once I made that my job, once I made it like the thing that I have to do in order to earn money, that's what I would be focused in on. And I wouldn't be focused in on delivering monetary policy or the information about monetary policy the way I do. So I'm not making up excuses for it. I just simply just don't want to. All right. I use Robinhood as well. I like the cartoon screen. Buy and wait instead of buy and trade. I buy stocks. I mean, I buy stocks and Bitcoin, and I try to invest into the house with upgrades and maintenance and all the other stuff that goes along with it. If you use 10,000 invested in real estate, it's like you're investing 120,000 or something like that. Leverage other people's money. T-bills are now below 5%. I definitely look into crypto Bitcoin as I gain more capital. I will look into real estate, owning property and land. Yeah, I do $50. I try to do $50 every time I get paid, from whether it's from my paycheck, from Google, from wherever. If I get paid, I try to put $50 into Bitcoin. So maybe it's 4 times a month, maybe it's only twice a month, but I do that consistently. Dollar cost average into Bitcoin for 4 years, and Lynn Alden says you will never be down. That even if you were to start at the peak and you dollar cost average for 4 years into Bitcoin consistently, you will be up. And now, that's coming from one of the smartest people I know when it comes to investing and understanding the Bitcoin market. I don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? If that's what they have figured out, I want to be a Bitcoin holder. I dollar cost averaged into it. It worked. It worked incredibly well for me. I doubled my money inside of about 4 years. And that's if I sold today. Lumberjack, it's far better as a multiplier. All right, you're welcome. Okay, let's see here, Rocket. I need to pay off this $5,000 debt by the end of the year. Yeah, absolutely. Pay off debts. Pay off debts and then go and invest. So if you have debts, pay off debts. Be good at saving money and paying off debts. All right. Once you get good at that, the day that your debts are over, switch it over into investments. All right. Rocket, here is another idea. Harris is going to try to utilize 31 million acres in a new Green Deal for solar. You could work doing that for a couple of lifespans. That's hypothetical. All right, I like buying Bitcoin at 15K when everyone thinks it's a scam and just holding it. Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I mean, but how do you, dollar cost averaging is simple. You don't think about it. Timing the market, it can be a big purchase. A lot of times, people hold out and they put, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is, and that is a huge chunk to put in. Now, I put in, what was it? I don't know, $5,000 or so over the last, 4 years. I hardly even noticed any payments. Like, I hardly noticed any. I mean, every time I did it, it was like, man, $50, and then it was gone, and then I didn't think about it anymore, right? All right, take the money from real estate and put it right into the stock market like a slot machine. Ooh, I don't know about that. All right, hey Simon, what's your view on the Austrian school business cycle theory, or ABCT? Artificial credit boom and malinvestment lead to resource misallocation and thus a deflationary collapse. Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. Like, I guess the simplest way to kind of understand that is like the undergrowth burning out, right? Because that's really what the Austrian School of Economics is saying, is that if you have all this debt, you're going to have malinvestment taking place. And if this malinvestment is creating like the undergrowth that is like depriving the forest from being really able to prosper and do well, right? To flourish, that's what I should say. In order keeping the forest from being able to flourish, when the fire rips through, this is when the debt destruction takes place. Because if you have all this malinvestment, which is the undergrowth in the forest that is sucking away the ability to flourish, that is like the deflationary pressure within it. Like all this malinvestment is keeping the forest from growing any bigger or better. But then you have this devastation of this wildfire that rips through and it burns out all that undergrowth, all that dead undergrowth, right? But it leaves the established plants, the big trees, they're able to live through it, right? They're able to get through this undergrowth burning, this forest fire, killing off everything, and that's like the destruction of debt that's happening. Once you have that destruction of debt and people are starting over from a defaulted, bankrupt position, and everybody says, okay, well, you lost your ass, that's it. Now there's room for new growth. Now there's room for the new green shoots to take place, so to speak. And ultimately, that cycle like that, I think, is very necessary, especially when you have, as much debt issuance as takes place, and then the malinvestment or the irrational exuberance that occurs because of that. All right. What time is it? All right. It's 3:05. An hour and 20 minutes into this. Okay, I'm going to give it like another 10 more minutes, guys, and then we're going to call it quits. I really appreciate everybody being here today. We got 175 people watching with 103 likes and $20 in super chats, plus the $10 Cash App that was sent to us earlier. So thank you very much for that. All right. Have you ever read the book Currency Wars by James Rickards? Yeah, I used to listen to a lot of James Rickards. And I do have that book. Unfortunately, I've never read it. Yeah, I've never read that book, though. All right. Lumberjack. Not my students. Bought 3 buildings this month. Already they don't know what they are doing. Bought 3... I wonder who. All right. I guess I'll have to go back and watch your show to find out. Nice talking to you and your great inspiration. What is deplorable looking for? Let me cruise back. What are you asking? I didn't even see that question. All right. Hey, Lumberjack, did you sell that house that you've been trying to sell yet? Okay. Well, let's cruise down here to the bottom. All right. Joshua, man, I wouldn't be buying things right now. Why not? I mean, why not? The new construction, like newly constructed homes, are now selling just about more now than they were at any time over the last few years prior to just right after the pandemic kicked in. All cash buyers are prevalent, right? There's people out there who have the money, who are spending it, and I'm not saying like, hey, you should go out there and buy everything under the sun. What I am saying is that there is always opportunity. Always. And to put a blanket statement out there that says I wouldn't buy anything right now, I think is gonna leave you without the ability to then make good rational decisions about where it is that you can position yourself, because you have already made that decision, right? I'm not buying anything. Well, what's gonna tell you to buy something? I mean, when are you gonna make that decision? Or what will give you the ability to make that decision? Do you think we're in debt deflation bubble right now, like a big one? No. No, not yet. I mean, I think it could happen, but I don't see that being the case as of this time. I'm saving all of my money until the election to see how the country reacts, and if it's bad, I will have money for a ticket out of here. See, now, Rocket, I don't even think that way. Like, I don't even like the election. I have so little concern over what happens over that like I am not even paying attention to that. Like, I still invest my money. I'm still doing the things that I do. That election has very little impact on my life. And I know a lot of people out there are going to say, "Oh no, man, and here's a laundry list of reasons why it's impacting your life." Not if I don't know about it, right? Not if I don't give it that meaning. Not if I choose not to turn a blind eye to it, but not to incorporate that into my strategies because I don't believe that is helpful, right? The things that I'm learning about monetary policy and where interest rates are headed and how the Federal Reserve is conducting their their strategy, I think is far more important and gives me the ability to make decisions based off of that understanding. Like, listening to a bunch of people argue over stuff that never comes to fruition is not helpful. Like, I don't find that helpful at all. Only reason I wouldn't buy now is potentially unrealized capital gain tax. How do you have unrealized gain? Like, if I had a Bitcoin, if I had gold, if I had, like, a big old gold bar in my hand that somebody gave me and it was just like, dude, here's your gold bar. I'd be like, all right. And I didn't have anything else, just this gold bar. I didn't have a job. I didn't have money. I didn't have anything. And they say, hey, man, that gold bar went up in price, man. You got to pay taxes on the unrealized gains that thing had gone up. It would be like, how? I don't have any money. Like, how could I pay taxes with something I don't have any of? Right? And they're like, no, it's in that thing. It was like, only if you sell it, it's in there. But I don't have it. It's in there. Right? It's like, how do you pay taxes on something that you haven't sold if you don't have the money? Just simply owning the asset means that they can take it from you because it's gone up in price? Does that, I mean, I think there's something inside of here that's going to deny that from taking place. I'm just saying, that's like, I don't know if they constitutionally can do that. Uh, uh, let's see. You did well, UE. I'm glad you're not looking to buy another property now. Who says I'm not? I think it's just for the best. Just my opinion. How do you know I'm not, Joshua? How do you know I'm not looking for another property to buy? I mean, you're kind of assuming that off of the things I'm saying, and you're kind of right, because I'm not. But, I mean, if the opportunity presented itself tomorrow, I would be there. Right? I'd be like, okay, I can liquidate some other things and see if I can't come up with the funds to acquire this piece of property because I think it's the right position to be in right now. I just haven't been looking at it because I hate my area for what it is. Like, and I mean, I love my town for living here. I do not like it for what has happened with the property values and the sheer amount of gentrification that is happening here. I mean, it's just like, it's obviously changed. Like, the working class citizen is being pushed out. You're getting retirement, hospital district, remote workers, they're moving in, right? And you can tell by, again, the property owners and their wants and needs and desires. We used to have a town that was full of dive bars. You could walk into any one of them and they would have the same type of guys in there, all drinking, all saying, having the same conversations, eating the same type of food. Now you got trendy places everywhere. They're super fancy and they're all full of, like, young, well, wealthy people, who are just, like, really just enjoying the fancy, foods and beers and all the other stuff that goes with it. And the dive bars are, few and far between, or they're becoming less, I should say. And, there's a couple of them on each end of town, but the ones in the middle are essentially becoming more of that of what it is that the property owners want establishments to be. That's what's happening, right? It's not that the people are kicking out the dive bars. It's just that Those ones that do exist here are flourishing just fine from the remainders of the workers, but the majority of the establishments here are catering to those of the property owners and their wants and needs. And that's why it's changing, you know. And it's nothing to get angry about. It's just the way it is, and it's kind of upsetting in a lot of ways, but then it's also pretty cool. All right. If my understanding, the local government and school systems require the taxes be on these homes and they never spend less, look into the bonds. Lumberjack, you know what to buy, dude. There's a lot of people out there trying to be like you, and it's not, and not know WTF they are doing. Agreed. Well, that's the problem, is that most people don't want to take the time to figure out what it is that they need to do. Right? Everything is learned. Nothing, I mean, there's some people who just have the natural ability to be good at everything that they do, but most people have to learn it, right? Most people have to fail at what they're doing in order to become good at it. In fact, I failed at everything that I got good at. Like, literally everything that I got good at, I had to fail at first. Because that's just the way it goes. Like, I'm kind of more of a proof of concept kind of person anyway. I just want to see it work, you know, and if I test it out and test the theory and mess around with it a little bit, and it was just like, oh yeah, bang, man, that thing just fell apart, but I kind of got a little bit of knowledge off of it, didn't I? And those are the ways that that's the way I've always figured everything out. It's like, you know, you kind of mess it up, screw it up, and then you're like, okay, well, what did I learn from that mess up? How did I screw that up? And maybe I won't do that next time. And you do that enough and you get pretty good at stuff, you know. I'm going to call it quits, guys. This was a fun live stream. I really liked hanging out. We got 192 people with 113 likes. Thank you very much for hitting that like button. We got $20 in super chats because you guys are always so supportive of the Uneducated Economist with those super chats. Thank you so much for that. These streams stimulate the investment mind state. So awesome. Yeah, well, thank you, Rocket and Moby. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.